Welcome to Movie Speeching. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take good care. AI Artificial Intelligence is the name of the movie. Please like and subscribe to get every update. Shortly, global warming has caused a huge rise in sea levels and wiped out coastal cities all over the world. Millions of people have been displaced, and the now crazy climate causes global famine, so governments implement licensing pregnancy to fight overpopulation. To compensate for this, scientists create a series of robots known as mecha, who don't require as many resources to survive as humans do. The inventor of these mechas is Professor Hobby, who takes a female mecha apart in a conference while he explains that robots are programmed to react to damage or pain and to remember to avoid the cause of damage like a human would. Unfortunately, this doesn't mimic human emotion, which brings Hobby to the next step, a robot child programmed to love its parents. This mecha will be marketed to couples who yearn for a child but can't obtain the license to reproduce. 20 months after the presentation, Henry and his wife Monica visit their son Martin in the hospital. Martin was diagnosed with a rare disease and put in suspended animation until a cure is found. Martin's doctor worries about Monica, who still hopes for that cure and often comes to read to his son, and he advises Henry to help Monica cope with the grief she's currently suppressing. Hoping that this will help his wife to move on, Henry applies to Cybertronics beta testing and gets chosen by Hobby to test his latest invention, a child mecha named David. This robot is a prototype mecha child programmed to experience love. Monica is offended by the idea and argues with Henry, saying that he's trying to replace Martin when he isn't even dead yet. However, Monica eventually realizes that she needs to fill a hole in her heart and has a big need to take care of a child again, even if it's a mecha. After finally changing Monica's mind, Henry explains how the imprinting protocol works. Once they decide to keep David, they can choose to activate his imprinting, making David loyal to them just like a regular child that loves their parents. The imprinting is irreversible, meaning that if the couple ever decides to return David, he'll be scrapped. So it's very important for them not to imprint until they are sure. Later in the evening, Monica and Henry allow David into Martin's old room. David is eager to get along and make his parents happy, but remembering that he's not real makes Monica nervous, and she ends up shutting the door on him when he asks her to dress him. The next morning, David watched Monica prepare breakfast with pure curiosity. He continued to watch over her for the rest of the day as she carried out her duties, although Monica tried to ignore him. Too frustrated, Monica had to put David in the closet. Moments later, Monica feels guilty and lets David out, apologizing by saying they were playing hide and seek. This causes David to surprise Monica in the bathroom while she is on the toilet, thinking she is hiding there. During dinner, David watches his parents eat, and he is so fascinated that he pretends to drink from an empty glass to imitate Henry, then imitates how Monica eats pasta. When the noodles stuck to Monica's lips, David burst out laughing, startling his parents. That night, as Monica gets David ready for bed, she finally takes care of him as if he were her son. However, it also reminded her of Martin in the hospital, making her cry. The next morning, Monica decides to begin the imprinting ritual, accepting the fact that she needs David to deal with Martin's situation. After saying the code that would activate David's love, the boy's face softened and he called Monica Mom for the first time. This made Monica more attached to him, especially when he hugged her. One evening, Monica happily prepared to attend an event with Henry. However, Henry becomes worried about Monica's feelings for David, reminding her that he is a mechanic, but Monica sees David as a gift. When David came to say goodbye, his parents smelled something and realized that he had used up all of Monica's expensive perfume. To make matters worse, David asks Monica if she will ever die. Monica confirmed that she would, but she didn't want David to be alone, so Monica took Martin's old robot bear named Teddy and gave it to David so he would have company while they were gone. Absent. Sometime later, David shows Monica that he can relay audio from his phone by turning it into a speaker. The call comes from Henry, who can't hear Monica because David is on speakerphone. After much scolding, David finally gave her the phone and Monica received important news. A few days later, Monica returns home with Martin, who has awakened from his suspended sleep and been cured of his rare disease. As the days pass, Martin treats David like a toy, asking him to break things for him and wondering how he was made while poking him in the face. When asked the first thing he remembered, David drew a bird with feathers protruding from its tail. One afternoon, Martin asked Monica to read Pinocchio to him and David, secretly hoping to taunt David with the story. However, David is fascinated by the idea of a puppet turning into a real boy. During lunch, Martin invites David to participate in an eating contest. Monica and Henry panicked because they knew that this action could hurt David, but the boys did not listen to their warnings and continued eating. Finally, David stopped as one side of his face drooped, scaring everyone. David is then taken away for repairs while Monica holds his his hand, but hearing him say it didn't hurt made her panic. Seeing his mother worry so much about David made Martin jealous, so when he got home, he tricked David into secretly cutting Monica's hair while she was sleeping by telling her that she would love him for it. David initially refuses, but Martin manipulates him until he accepts. David then went into his parents' bedroom to cut Monica's hair with a pair of scissors, but at that moment Monica turned around and was almost injured by the scissors. Henry wakes up when Monica screams, and he angrily shakes David, demanding to know why he is doing this until Monica stops him. Some hair fell to the ground and was found by Teddy. Sometime later, as they are preparing everything for Martin's birthday party, Henry tries to convince Monica that David is no longer worth the risk, but Monica defends David by saying that he is just a kid. Children make mistakes. During the party, Martin's friends taunt David, poking his synthetic skin and using knives to test his ability to escape pain. This activates David's defense programming, causing him to hide behind Martin because he is the only person he feels safe with. He also started to back away, but went too far and accidentally pulled Martin to the bottom of the pool. The adults quickly came to pull Martin out of the water to give him CPR while David could only watch from the pool as he was left alone and there. After this incident, Monica becomes suspicious of David, but she also discovers the beautiful letters David wrote to her, leaving her devastated about how she feels about him. Finally, she decides that she has no other choice and tells David that they will go on a trip with Teddy, and David is happy because he thought he would spend the day with his mother. The next day, Monica cries as she goes to Cybertronics to destroy David. Finally, the guilt is so overwhelming that she changes her plans and drives into the woods, where an unsuspecting David has spread out a picnic rug. Monica quickly stopped him and finally told him that she had to leave him forever. Devastated, David begged and apologized for everything he had done. He also wondered if he would be accepted back into the family if he became a real boy like Pinocchio. Monica did not give in to his pleas, and before leaving, she gave David money and told him not to let anyone catch him, especially Cybertronics. David clung to her and refused to let go, so Monica had to push him away, surprising both of them. She then apologized and left, leaving David to watch the car in the distance. Meanwhile, in Rouge City, a mechanic named Joe emotionally comforts his customer before spending the night with her, which is his job. Next, Joe drove across town to meet his next client at a hotel. The owner asks Joe for a business license badge because an anti-robot group called Flesh Fair is looking for Mitch roaming the town. Then Joe changes his hair color before going into his customer's room. As he sat on the bed, he was shocked to see it drenched in blood, and it turned out his client was dead. At that moment, a man appeared in the room, confirming that he was the one who killed the woman. Joe realized he was trapped and immediately fled into an alley, where he used a small knife to remove his business license badge so he wouldn't be found. In the forest, David tells Teddy that he wants to find Pinocchio's blue fairy so she can turn him into a real boy. Suddenly, a garbage truck passes by dumping scrap parts, and tons of abandoned machinery appear to rummage through the trash to repair themselves. As David looks incredulously at what he sees, Joe also appears, and a moon-shaped plane chases him. It turned out to be the Flesh Fair group, and the Mechs immediately begin to run away in fear of being chased. This group kidnaps machines and destroys them in a spectacle to demonstrate their anti-robot campaign. They use scanners on their plane to track the mechanics, but a group of them also appear in the jungle on motorbikes and begin chasing the mechanics through the jungle, eventually entering a town. Small town. These guys shoot magnetic discs to trap the robots, and some of the machines are unfortunately captured, but David and Teddy manage to follow some of the machines to an abandoned house and meet a machine nanny who offers to take care of him. Todd. Unfortunately, the drivers still find the cabin and break through the wall to catch them all while the plane picks Joe up in a cage. During the struggle, David tried to hold Teddy, but he fell. At least a pile of tree branches broke his fall, so he quickly recovered and chased after the plane. Later, at the meat fair, Teddy is picked up by the employees and thrown into the lost and found. In the stadium, the crowd cheered as old abandoned machines continued to be destroyed by being pushed inside the cannons and shot down. David fearfully grabbed Joe's hand, who was surprised by the contact. Meanwhile, Teddy tries to get out some of the items he found and finds David in a cage. At that moment, a little girl hugged Teddy and saw David and thought he was a real boy. Then the girl approached her father, one of the programmers of the program, and the man was very worried when he learned that there was a boy among the mechanics. Back in the cage, David learns from the other robots that the humans are taking them down to maintain their superiority. The girl's father then approaches David and uses a portable X-ray machine to make sure that David is a robot. The father is shocked and fascinated by David's advanced system, but the host is not amused, and an argument ensues while David witnesses the mechanical nanny being hit with acid like part of the game. The host insisted that David was also involved in the series, ignoring the programmer's explanations about David's worth. The host then takes David away, and as he holds Joe's hand for safety, they are both dragged across the the field and into an acid trap. As the host introduced David to the crowd, he also denounced the way the mechanic kid insulted humanity. However, the crowd was silent because they were not used to seeing children on the show and now felt conflicted. In the future, acid fell on David's shoulder, causing him to scream and cry in fear. This convinced the crowd that David was a real child, and they were so horrified that they turned on the host, throwing objects at him while the girl's father ordered the guards to release David and Joe just before the riotous performance began, allowing the duo to be released. Escape. No problem. In Hobby's office, there are many photos of David growing up, and it is revealed that he is named after Hobby's late son. A group arrives to report that David has been spotted at the meat fair and assures Hobby that the machine is fine. Back in the forest, David and Teddy were dumbfounded when they suddenly saw the moon and thought it was Flesh Fair's plane. Just in case, they take a different route, and David shares with Joe his wish to find the Blue Fairy. Joe says that most women can be found in Rouge City, and they agree to head there together. First they need a ride, so Joe finds a group of teenagers and uses a hologram pen to manipulate them, promising lots of mecha women in their future. The boys give them a ride, and once they reach the city, Joe gives David a tour, teaching him about the flashing lights and the weirdly shaped buildings. David becomes fascinated by a statue of an angel because he thinks it's the Blue Fairy and tries to enter the church, but Joe takes him away. Finally, they meet Dr. No, a program that acts as an omniscient encyclopedia. Thanks to the money Monica gave, David learned that the Blue Fairy was at the end of the world. This information came from a quote in Hobby. Joe doesn't like that because he knows that machines that go to the ends of the earth will never come back, so he tries to explain to David that humans hate robots. However, David insists that Monica would like him if he were a real boy, does not believe Joe when he says that a human could never like a robot, and scolds him for the way he treated him, for insinuating otherwise. When they left Nos, the police found them and arrested Joe, still thinking he had killed the woman in the hotel. Curious, David gets into the helicopter's driver's seat and powers it on, but he can't control it, and his so-called piloting causes huge chaos around the city, breaking things and almost hitting people. As people flee in panic, Joe uses the distraction to escape the police and find David. Joe jumped into the helicopter and controlled the vehicle smoothly and escaped safely. Hours later, they arrive in the wasteland that was once Manhattan, a place Joe calls where the lion roars. Following the problem of rising sea levels, the remaining parts of the city were left in ruins and underwater. David finds a series of lion statues with water coming out of their mouths, which reminds him of Joe's quote. Seeing this as a sign, they land the helicopter on the building next to the lions. Then David and Joe search for Professor Hobby. David finds a door with a fairy tale quote and walks through it, finding a chair with someone sitting on it. When he turned around, David was shocked to see a child who looked exactly like him. The other David just smiled and invited him to read books with him, telling him that he existed, but David first thought that this guy would replace him. Angry, David grabs a lamp and smashes it into the table and the other David's head, revealing that it is also a machine. Joe rushes out in fear as David attacks, screaming that he is special and unique. Just then, Professor Hobby arrives to stop him and assures David that he is a real boy, declaring that he is his own Blue Fairy. Dr. No's clues to finding the Green Fairy are designed to lead David to Professor Hobby, and the journey also tests David's motivation to see if it is strong enough to make him pursue a dream. Unknown dream, something other mechanics cannot do. Hobby leaves the office to gather his team, leaving David to ponder about his trip being part of someone else's project. David then entered another room, where he found several other machines similar to his, including one that was still open. He approached the window and saw the bird he remembered as his first memory, which turned out to be a statue outside the office. Several boxes were displayed while David and his female colleague were mass-produced for sale. Realizing he was never alone, David goes outside and jumps into the water while Joe watches from a helicopter. Underwater, a school of fish carried David around until he came across something that caught his attention. David reached out, but Joe found him first and pushed him away with the helicopter's outstretched arm. Once outside, David realized that he had found the Blue Fairy in the water. Unfortunately, before they can go any further, Joe is suddenly magnetically attracted to a police helicopter flying overhead. Joe says goodbye to David and asks him to tell his story to the girls as he grows up as a real boy. He then activated the helicopter's underwater mode before flying away. Determined to find the Blue Fairy, David flies a helicopter into an abandoned carnival with Teddy at his side. They see all the sights depicting fairy tales and eventually discover Pinocchio, whom he follows until he finds the statue of the Blue Fairy. Just then, the Ferris wheel collapsed on top of the helicopter, trapping them. But David didn't care. He only had eyes for the Blue Fairy and begged her to turn him into a real boy. However, the TN did not respond, and as years passed, David remained trapped inside, never losing hope even when the lights began to go out. 2,000 years later, the world was covered in ice and snow, and humans became extinct for a time. One day, an alien spaceship appears and flies over Manhattan as it invades the planet. There, they move David's helicopter, finding him and Teddy on the ice. They quickly reactivated it, and David began to convulse before realizing the blue fairy in front of him. He immediately got off the helicopter and approached the frozen statue while the alien creatures observed it. Then he touched the blue fairy, causing her to crack and shatter before him. The aliens used this opportunity to scan David's memory to better understand the planet, and suddenly David finds himself sitting at the table in Monica's house. The house looked exactly like he remembered, and David eagerly searched for Monica, but it was another voice that answered. David is surprised to see the blue fairy alive and talking and asks her to turn him into a real boy, but she admits that she cannot do that. The aliens use the blue fairy to talk to David, informing him that Monica is gone and that the fairy cannot revive her because her remains are long gone. As David cries, Teddy approaches him to remind David of the time he cut Monica's hair and reveals that he still has that lock of hair, meaning the aliens can now bring his mother back. David returns to his old room and fondly remembers his friend Joe while Teddy repairs himself. Just then, they see a figure at the door and think it's Monica, but it's an alien who admits to being fascinated by humans. He wished to bring humanity back to life by using organic traces to clone them, but unfortunately, all his efforts failed because the clones only lived for one day. This would also happen if they brought Monica back. David still holds out hope that Monica will be as special as him and last forever as he was when he was trapped in the helicopter, so he goes looking for her. He found her in her room and started crying, pushing her hair out of her face. Soon, Monica woke up and greeted David with a warm smile. Now, on this day, David and Monica can spend some time together. David happily shows Monica pictures from his trip. They play hide and seek and also celebrate her birthday. When the lights outside dimmed, David hugged Monica to bed, afraid she wouldn't wake up. Suddenly, Monica told him she loved him, which made David smile both sadly and happily. Then he decided to sleep next to her, which made his dream come true for the first time in his life. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.